So first you're gonna start out with raw milk. I buy raw goat's milk from a local farmer here, but you could use cow's milk or sheep's milk. And we're only gonna be talking about animal milks today. You can make kefirs from other types of milk like coconut and things like this, but I recommend that you actually use real milk from animals. And the reason I like goat's milk so much is that it has medium chain fatty acids. These are much easier to digest than cow's milk. There's a lot more I could say about all those subjects, but you can use any animal milk. I just really like to do it with goat's milk. And the first thing that you're going to do is use your starter culture. I got mine from my local farmer, so find it from a friend, or you can order it online. I'll put a link down below to a company that sells them and you can order it. And what you'll do is just add it to your raw milk and set it aside in a dark, cool place for 24 hours. You screw the lid on tight, pull it back about a quarter to half turn, where it's loose like this, and that's gonna allow the air to go in and ferment it for you. Now you're gonna take it out, and that's where we are today. I've let this sit for 24 hours, and now it's time to strain out the kefir grains, and we're gonna do a second fermentation, which I recommend doing because you're gonna be able to grow out the microbes even further for more benefits, and you can add flavors at this point. It is drinkable right now once you remove the kefir grains, but let me show you guys the full process. So just be careful that you do stop it within 24 hours. I like to do 24 hours for the first ferment because I feel like I'm getting the right amount of life. So if you can picture a little bell curve, we want to create our probiotics when it's getting near the peak, where it has peak diversity and peak population of microbes. Once it goes off the edge and starts to wane, you can still drink it, it's still good, you can still use it, but it's not gonna be as beneficial or as tasty as when you get closer to that peak. So the 24-hour mark inside of a home is what I have found. So 68 to 75 degrees in your house, it's going to ferment really well at that 24-hour time. I like to use half-gallon mason jars, and if you're buying it from a local farmer, that is what they're gonna be using. And make sure that you have a plastic lid. You don't really want kefir to come into contact with metal unless it's high quality stainless steel. Now, if you're just letting it sit for a very short amount of time, I wouldn't worry too much about it. But you don't want to be storing it in a steel or tin or any type of metal, because there can be some stripping of those metals and they'll get into your milk. So glass. I even drink it out of glass. If I take it with me to go on the road or something, I put it in a mason jar and I drink it from that, versus one of my, like a stainless like this, where I don't really know the quality of the stainless. So with these jars, it's really nice because you just ferment in the same jar that you buy it in. There's no extra cleaning or anything that you have to do. Okay, so let's get started, and we're gonna strain out our kefir grains. So here what I have is a plastic strainer, and then I have my vessel that I'm going to grab all the milk in. So you're gonna need a strainer, a wood spoon. I like to use a plastic strainer just for that reason, for the metal thing. This is a really high quality stainless steel pot from Fissler, so I trust this, and it's only in it in a short time. So I wouldn't, don't freak out too much about what I told you about the metal. Look it up online if you want to learn more about it. So then you're going to want a small container for your kefir grains, because just like a sourdough starter or any other type of fermentation, we continue on the mother, or like kombucha, you have the mother SCOBY. That's what the kefir grains are like. So every week I start a new jar, and we add fresh milk for the kefir grains to sit in for the next week. So that's ready to go for us. I have the plastic cap ready to go as well. And then we're just gonna strain it out. And after the 24-hour mark, you'll notice the kefir grains are sitting at the top of this milk. Now, if you went too long and you waited beyond 24 hours, let's say you went like 36 hours, what could happen is the curds in the whey would separate, and that is not ideal. You'll probably destroy your grains if that happens too, and you'll have to start over. So Here's what the grains look like after they've grown out. My grains, they've been going this whole year. I got new ones at the beginning of the year. And we'll just throw it into our storage container here, which is gonna go back in the fridge when we're done. Now we're gonna add our flavors. So we're gonna add in our milk to our blender. And if you don't have a blender, that's okay. You could just do this by hand in the bowl. But since I have a blender, I just like to do it like this, just to get it really stirred up. And at this point, I would say the base that you should do, you should add some sugar, because in the second fermentation, if you feed the microbes sugar, they're gonna be able to grow out really rapidly and develop further. So I like to use raw honey from a local bee farmer. You could also use maple syrup to do this. The other thing that you can do at this point, you could blend in fruit. And I really like to do this, and I've tried blueberries and bananas, cherries, papaya, all of those different ones that work really well. They're really tasty. Banana is probably my favorite. And when I do banana, I do 2 ripe bananas, and I don't need to add in any honey at all. That adds enough sweetness for me. You may like your kefir really sweet, so maybe add in more honey, more maple syrup for yourself. Now, the only issue I have with blending in the fruit is that it makes it really frothy. When you're pouring it off back into the jar, you just want to try not to get a bunch of that in there, because it just takes up a lot of space. But if you had a vacuum blender where it doesn't pull in air, then it would be amazing. It would work perfect. But it's not the end of the world, but it's just something I've noticed when you do blend in the fruit can be a little annoying. So for me, I'd like to do 1 heaping teaspoon in my kefir for the second ferment. So big one just like that. And I'll just use another spoon to get all that honey off. And then I'm gonna blend this on level 1 so I don't make it frothy. And then when I pour this in and the second ferment happens, it's very controllable. Now, after the second ferment's finished, another thing that you can do, this will just go in the fridge and sit until you drink it all. Another thing that I like to do to avoid the frothiness is to take my kefir out and then blend fruit the day that I want to drink it. So I just blend up a bunch, and then me and my wife each have a glass of blueberry kefir or strawberry kefir or whatever we want. The reason I do everything the way that I do it is so that it doesn't take me a lot of time. I'm doing this once and it lasts me the whole week. So when I come home from bringing my new milk home, I add my kefir grains, I set it to the side to ferment for 24 hours. The next day I come and I do this little process, and it's taking me 10, 15 minutes, and I have kefir for the whole week. Okay, so I'm just blending it just enough to get the honey incorporated. Okay, now I've got my jar, the same jar that we just got everything out of, right? And it just goes straight back in there. There's no cleaning, there's no mess. You go back, you ferment into this, and this is the same glass that you'll be drinking out of for the whole week as well. So we're not creating any other dishes to clean other than our strainer, our pot, and our blender. You see me pouring it in pretty softly, and that's because I'm trying to avoid getting all these air bubbles in here. So if you do have a little bit leftover kefir, this especially will happen if you're adding in a bunch of fruit, because they're adding in more volume. You can just pour this into another glass and drink it yourself. And you'll notice I filled it up quite high. That's because there is some air in here. It will drop down a little bit. Okay, but I don't want to go all the way to the top. This little bit of extra here, I'll just throw it in my dog's bowl over here, my dog's water, and she loves to drink it. Okay, so just like the first fermentation, you're gonna put the lid on, get it till it's tight, unscrew it a quarter turn so that air can get in here and the fermentation can happen. And we'll just set this over to the side. Okay, and now it's just the same process again for our second jar. Be sure to hit the jar and knock out any of those kefir grains that got stuck. And the correct pronunciation is kefir, but I always end up calling it kefir. I'm sure you guys have been through that problem as well. So we're gonna throw our grains into our storage container. My strainer's all done. I can throw that in the sink. We're gonna wipe up the mess we made on our storage jar. And then with your stored kefir grains, all you need to do is just put the lid on tight and put it in your fridge. and then it's ready for you next week. So for the second fermentation, this is really important. How long do you want to let this ferment? Well, I never let it go more than about 8 hours. And you want to keep an eye on it if you can, or pull it at 8 hours. Set a timer, because there's been many times where I forget and I go to sleep, and then I wake up the next morning and I've got an explosion here because with curds in the way have separated and the curds have pushed up and out. The ideal time to get it is right before the separation or right when it starts to separate. And you can actually see that. There'll be a thinning somewhere in here. You'll see some of the whey liquid being created. And that's a perfect time to, boom, grab it and throw it in your fridge, stop the fermentation process. Or just set a timer for 8 hours, throw it in, and you'll be good to go. Here's some of my kefir from last week. It has a really nice yogurty smell. This is one I blended with banana. And it has that fermentation smell, and it's so nice. You'll notice it's how alive it is, because when you open the top of your jar, it'll pop and air will come out. That's from the off-gassing of the microbes. And when you drink it, it has a little bit of effervescence to it. It gets a little bit more sour rather than sweet when you just have the regular raw milk. And it's just absolutely delicious. I love including it in my diet. I think it's done a lot of great things for my health, my digestion. And let me know, did you guys like a cooking video? Normally we're outside doing gardening or dealing with animals, but I wanted to start introducing you guys to more nutritional information and things that I do for my health.